Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Unraveling Politics, a political analysis show. Today is November 5th, exactly a year after the 2024 election. Hard to believe all that has happened since then. I know in my life it has both felt like a very long time and also not very long at all. So, what about the election results from yesterday? That will come later this week. I'm not exactly sure when, but that will be later this week or the beginning of next week. Today we are talking about a female president. Before I continue, if you are a woman and you agree or disagree with my comments, please let me know in the comments below. I'd like to know your thoughts because I'm not a woman, obviously, so I can only provide from my perspective, a general perspective. A year ago, according to Democrats' plan, Kamala Harris was supposed to be elected over Donald Trump and become the first female president. About 9 years ago, it was supposed to be Hillary. So now what? We are going to talk mostly in the abstract today. If that's not your thing, then please reconsider watching. We will go over the history of some of the rights of women in America, the progress women have made over the last 10 years or so, and then we will say where we're at, where I think we might go in the future. So why is having a female president important? Well, first, let me be very clear. I'm not playing identity politics here. We shouldn't elect a woman just because they're a woman. They need to be a qualified woman. Of course, that depends on opinion, of course, and that's the whole point. I mean, in the abstract, when will we have our first female president, and why is that important? Politics is a nasty business. We all know that. And having a low ceiling for women and girls makes it less likely they will enter politics. For example, if you know the reward for doing something is unlikely or impossible, but the cost for trying are high, will you still do it? The answer is probably no. I remember in 2016, I asked my sister at the time, she was only about 10 years old, I asked her, do you ever see yourself as being president of the United States? And it was mostly a joke, to be funny. And she said, I can't be president because I'm not a man. And I've never forgotten that, and I think that's really sad, and that captures what I'm trying to say here. If women don't see female scientists, they will think that women can't or shouldn't do that. And same with leadership roles, and on and on and on. The reverse is true as well. If boys want to be a nurse, but they only see female nurses, then they'll think that nursing is only for women, and this applies to race too. Until Obama, black people might have thought, well, being president is not for black people. And that's really unfortunate, and I'm glad that that barrier has been broken. My friend Dylan once said, yeah, he's been on the show before, has once said he thinks that once we have our first female president, once that barrier is finally broken, we can kind of move on. For example, when Cory Booker ran in 2020, it was not really a big deal because, one, he sucked and still kind of does, in my opinion, and two, we already had a black president. Once we have a female president, which I believe will happen eventually, having a second one won't matter as much. And at the same time, do I think that women should make everything about being a woman? Like, should that be the cornerstone of their campaign? No. And Hillary did that, and as a man, I find that very repulsive. And no matter what party this potential female president runs as, they will need men's support. No doubt about it. And I appreciate Kamala Harris did not do that. As I reported last year during the campaign, I think that helped her, even though she still lost. So let's go into history a little bit. In the 1860s, when Congress was passing the 14th Amendment, which stated, quote, but the right to vote at any election for the choice of electors for President and Vice President of the United States, representatives in Congress, the executive and judicial officials of a state, or the members of the legislature thereof, is denied to any male inhabitants of such state, being 21 years of age and citizens of the United States, or in any way abridged, except for the participation in rebellion or other crime, the basis of representation therein shall be reduced in the proportion which the number of such male citizens shall bear to the whole number of male citizens 21 years of age in such a state. End quote. Now, I know that was 19th century speak. So women did apply to the Equal Protections Clause, which was also in the 14th Amendment. And this is also going to be another hard one to read. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and the state in which they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. But women were not, and then that's the end of the quote, women were not guaranteed the right to vote in the 1860s amendment. Now, not surprisingly, they were very furious. In fact, women like Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton were opposed to the amendment. And it still passed anyway, of course, and the fight for women's rights continued for decades longer. It wasn't until the 1910s that women's rights, voting rights in particular, were put back on the table. If you were not aware, women voting in the 19th century was strictly illegal. Everywhere. In the 1872 election, Susan B. Anthony and 14 other women registered to vote and actually voted. They casted ballots, and they said the 14th Amendment guaranteed their right to vote. Except I just read the amendment, and that's very shaky at best. All persons born and naturalized in the United States should have covered women, but it didn't in the eyes of the law at the time. Women were arrested and they were fined about $5,000 in today's money. Luckily, they never paid them. In 1875, in another case, in Minor v. Harperset, the Supreme Court unanimously ruled women did not have the right to vote. And sadly, this case was never overturned in the courts. Instead, it was overturned by the 19th Amendment. So the 19th Amendment, it guaranteed women the right to vote, and it passed in 1920 once it was ratified by the required 36 states at the time. It simply states, the right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be abridged or denied by the United States or any other state on the account of sex. Congress shall have the power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. End quote. Just as a fun fact, the southern states took much longer to ratify it. Mississippi didn't ratify it until 1984, even though it was already in effect. So, women had gotten the right to vote, but were they actually in politics? Well, not at first. The first woman elected to the House of Representatives was Jeanette Bacon. I think I said it right, Jeanette Bacon, and it was in 1916, and she voted against World War I. She served only one term until she was reelected in 1940 and voted against World War II, the only member of Congress to do so. And the first senator elected was Hayti Caraway in 1932. In 1937, Gallup asked survey respondents about their willingness for a female president, and about 1/3 of respondents said yes. The same amount said they'd be willing to vote for a female president. The Roper Center of Public Opinion Research reported in 1998, so this was at the end of the century, who they thought would be more likely to be elected first. A black candidate, a person under 40, because we've never had a president under 40, a Hispanic or a Hispanic or Asian person. 41% woman, 27% said under 40, 22% said black, 4% said Hispanic, and 1% said Asian. They've been wrong. We got the black president first, 10 years later, and I would argue a Hispanic president is much more likely today than an Asian woman or a person under 40. And I thought I'd throw that in there. Polling has showed ever since the 1970s, whether or not respondents themselves supported having a woman president, they believed a woman president was coming in the near future. And as we know, it's been 50 years. Still haven't gotten one. And the big problem seems to be that people are willing to vote for a female candidate, but they aren't excited about it. And frankly, I think that makes a lot of sense. You're supposed to vote for people based on their policies. And so far, I think the Venn diagram of people who have the right policies and the right amount of voters who would support a woman has not lined up yet. It would have to be a near perfect circle to elect one. Americans tend to vote on identity more than anything. And I'm one of the few people who still votes on policy. It's one of the few instances where extrapolating based on my own experience hasn't really worked. In 1972, Shirley Chisholm, who was a black woman, she was the first woman and black person to seek the Democratic Party's nomination. She was a black woman elected to Congress, and she said that she felt more discrimination for being a woman than she was being black. So you can imagine there was a long way to go. In 1984, Democratic candidate Walter Mondale picked Geraldine Ferraro to be his running mate, and she was the first woman ever nominated on a major party ticket. The second came with Sarah Palin in 2008. Of course, they lost, and then so did Geraldine Ferraro. And then in 2008, there was Hillary Clinton. She lost the Democratic nomination to Barack Obama, which was quite the accomplishment, even though she was not the nominee until 2016, when she became the first woman nominee of any major political party. And I'll tell you this, I do remember the 2016 election very, very fondly. Maybe not fondly, but I remember it well. And I wrote in my book, which is linked below, about my excitement of the election of the first female president. And here's Beyonce, and that basically summed up how I felt. So I'll play Beyonce at the time right now.
There was a time when a woman's opinion did not matter. If you were black, white, Mexican, Asian, Muslim, educated, poor, or rich. If you were a woman, it did not matter. Less than 100 years ago, women did not have the right to vote. Look how far we've come from having no voice to being on the brink of making history. Again, by electing the first woman president. Yes. But we have to vote. The world looks to us as a progressive country that leads change. 8 years ago, I was so inspired to know that my nephew, a young black child, could grow up knowing his dreams could be realized by witnessing a black president in office. And now, we have the opportunity to create more change. I want my daughter to grow up seeing a woman lead our country. And know that her possibilities are limitless. We have to think about the future of our daughters, our sons, and vote for someone who cares for them as much as we do. And that is why I'm with her.
As you can imagine, it was a truly exciting moment. Here's a picture of me with Chelsea Clinton when she came to a local town in November 2016, the Saturday before Election Day. It truly felt electrifying. And then we all know what happened after that. Anyway, there was the Me Too movement, and that really came in late 2016 until about early 2018. It had existed for a while, but it was the election of Donald Trump that really bubbled it to the surface. And I think that really moved the needle in many ways. The following year, in 2018, a record amount of women were elected to Congress, 117 in fact. They were mostly Democratic women, although more Republican women were elected in 2020 and in 2022. Speaking of 2020, Kamala Harris became the first woman ever elected to national office, which was quite the achievement at the time. And that leads us to last year. Kamala was not the first woman of color. She didn't win the position to be elected the party's nominee. She didn't win the position. She inherited it from President Biden. Had she been elected, it would have been quite a monumental moment in American history. And I think what is really remarkable is that the Kamala Harris campaign didn't make that a big part of her campaign, which I believe truly helped her, because many men still find the whole woman president thing to be very revolting. And I also can find it revolting when a woman emphasizes it a lot. It's like, at least for me, like I want to know more about them other than they're a woman. Like, I can look at you and be like, all right, you're a woman, but I'd like to know more about you as a person and your policies. Even though I didn't back then when I was supporting Hillary in 2016. That wasn't how I was. So where are we at now? Well, the Democratic Party is struggling nationally. They stand against Trump, of course, but they haven't evolved much beyond that. It remains to be seen what the party will stand for in 2028, which is still expected at this stage. However, I do not think Democrats will nominate a woman in 2028. I don't think Republicans are going to either. So that means we have to wait until at least 2032 to maybe see one. Republicans will likely pick J.D. Vance in 2028, and if Vance wins, he'll be picked again. One thing I would say is that the first female president will probably be a Republican. Why might that be the case? Well, there's been a long theory that if you have a Democratic woman nominee, Republican women will cross the aisle and support them. The last two of the three last elections show that is not the case. However, it remains untested the other way around. This may be naivety here, but I do believe there is some evidence to show that Democratic women may support a Republican woman. However, the Kaiser Family Foundation, a nonprofit, polled women, and the top issues for women were the economy, threats to democracy, and 13% said abortion. If Republicans can nominate a woman candidate who will support nothing less than a 12 to 15-week abortion ban, then that may bring Democratic voters on side. Democrats also already have an advantage. They already have an advantage with women voters, so nominating a woman is less likely to bring swing votes on their side. At the same time, Republicans are considered tougher on things like immigration, crime, foreign policy, and more. So that could potentially neutralize the issue among Republican voters. At the same time, it could also depress their turnout. Lastly, there has been quite a few successful, depending on your opinion, female Republican governors. like Kim Reynolds of Iowa, Kay Ivey of Alabama, South Dakota's Kristi Noem until she resigned to join the Trump administration, Arkansas's Sarah Huckabee Sanders, and more. And I think what's really interesting is, except for Iowa, these are deep red states, which shows the Republican base has not turned off from female candidates. However, I think the interesting counter argument is that it appears that Republicans only pick women when it's politically safe to do so. It is interesting that there aren't really any Republican women elected governor to a swing state in like in Maine or Michigan, which they're tighter contests. And that's important, and that's kind of strange because Maine and Michigan have female governors who are Democrats. One more thing I'll end this episode with. In 1993, CNN did a poll asking voters whether they thought that there would be a black president. Pew Research reported on this in 2013, and I think it's truly fascinating. Back in 1993, 10% of Americans said there was an excellent chance that a black man would be elected president within the next 20 years. 44% said good, so that's 54% of the country. And they were right. 54% of the country was right. We did have a black president within 20 years. In 2013, they were asked, Pew asked the poll again, and they said 65% of Americans believe that there would be an excellent or a good chance, if you combine the numbers together, that there would be another black president elected within 20 years. And we're kind of reaching the end of that 20 years. We will be there in not too long now, about 8 years. We still have 2 more elections to go through, but we might not have another black president. So we'll have to wait and see. Just 15 years later, we had our first black president from 1993. And it is crazy how things change so quickly. Anyway, that is it for this episode. Thank you for tuning in. Please like and subscribe if you like this content. It's a little different than what I normally do, but hopefully you enjoyed it. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments below as always, and then subscribe, like, do all that. So thank you, and have a great weekend. Bye-bye.